Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and I am the host who is back with the most this week as we head into Christmas, that most beloved G.I. Joe time of the year. We are also nearing the end of the run of Real American Hero from Marvel. We're covering issue 153. There's a lot of things that are wrapping up. The year's almost over. Like it's like you can hear the music swelling. The fat lady's getting ready to sing. Captain America's standing in front of a bunch of portals about to get slaughtered by Thanos when you just hear a little on your left. And that's what it is right now. Like we're screaming towards the end of the ARAH era. The ARAH era. That's a fun era to say quickly. In and out your era. Boston. That's a terrible Boston joke there. If you're new to the program, welcome. This is it's a bad starting point because we're nearing the end. But actually, no, we're ongoing. The pod's continuing. We're just nearing the end of the ARAH run. This is the podcast where I go through all the books sequentially, page by page, panel by panel. I apply my specific brand of expertise to it and try to find some deeper meaning into each page and each panel and each storyline of G.I. Joe Real American Hero. We also did all of the cartoons. We did Sunbow. We did the DIC stuff. We did the Extreme. And, and we're gearing up towards our next iteration, which is going to be called You on Joe. So listeners, if you want to be a part of the next iteration of Joe, we've got a lot of you reaching out already. Please send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com or reach out on any of our social medias at joeonjoepod. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Send me a note. Say that you want to participate and you want to be a guest. It's really easy. We just call you up on like Skype or Zoom or whatever and literally just talk to you about specifically one thing that you love about G.I. Joe. It's as specific as possible. So if there's a certain thing that character maybe or a storyline or a vehicle, maybe you love the swivel arm battle grip. I loved it. I thought it was great. And you want to talk about that and how that changed the game. We can do that. And we'll get in as much detail as I can possibly muster. So please reach out and get ready for that. So that'll be coming in the new year. And what else? Oh, if you want to help support the show, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/JoeandJoePod. That helps keep the show afloat. And speaking about having people on your left and people backing me up, recently, I have to give a big shout out to our friends over at What's on Joe Mind. They hosted me for an extensive like 2.5 hour chat session talking about G.I. Joe 300. And my thoughts on that book. So I want to thank Mike and Racktime Rob for having me on. You can certainly find that in their feed, the What's on Joe Mind feed. They're great, and it was one of those situations where I didn't think I had room for it in this show because of just the schedule that we're on here. So I reached out and said, hey, why don't you guys? Would it be okay to get on there? I want to talk about 300 a little bit, and so we did, and we talked about a whole lot of other stuff. Not just G.I. Joe 300. We talked about comics and collecting and the industry. I mean, it was a 2.5 hour conversation. So, if you're putting up the tree or if you're driving in a long car ride to your in-laws and you want to hear three middle-aged dudes palaver about collecting children's things, that could be your thing. But no, I love those guys. And I want to give a big shout out to a friend of the show and friend, Caesar Moo, over at the Order of Battle podcast. So this pod should be going up on the 21st or so of December. Keep your ears peeled. We did another extensive interview with them over on for the Order of Battle podcast, and that's going to be launching on the 28th. So give them a subscribe, follow their podcast. It's great. We had another far-reaching. We talked a lot of G.I. Joe actually on that one. We did talk a lot of G.I. Joe, but we also just talked, comics. Man, I could talk comics forever. So, as evidenced by we're nearing. I've done over 300 issues of this show, but we're nearing. By the way, I number them on the show because of the feed and stuff. We're nearing issue 300. So you could. I got a lot of comic book talk to talk. So yeah, so just a lot. There's a lot of things coming to a head, and I appreciate every one of you going on this journey with me. It's a whole lot of fun, and thanks to those guys for having me on both pods and any other, any pod like the Cyclops is Waiting for Me X-Men podcast, like, and that you guys follow and listen. I've heard from a few guys that you went over and listened to the X-Men one and you loved it, and or even if you hated it, but you said you loved it, and it means a lot because it I appreciate you following me over there. So that's a whole lot of fun. The other thing I appreciate you doing is supporting our sponsor, which is the Movies in a Meal podcast. And there are a lot of good movies out in theaters right now, and a lot of movies coming up that they're going to be needing to talk about, a lot of Oscar bait movies. So you want to make sure you tune into their podcast and see what the dealio is.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie, it's about not two movies, it's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
I can't believe the word dealio came out of my mouth. I haven't thought about that word probably 20 years. And it came flying out the recesses of my brain. I think it's because I've been living in a retro celebration world. 2 days ago, I was at Amoeba Records, and you guys know I'm from Chicago. So, and I was 10 years old in 1985, 10 years old in 86, and specifically January 26th, my friend, when the Bears won the Super Bowl. And I was at Amoeba Records. I found a sealed mint 12-inch vinyl of the Super Bowl Shuffle. I'm still on cloud 9. Now it's sealed, so I'm not opening it, but because I'm a collector, but it's amazing. I've always had the single, the smaller, what is that? Is that a 6-inch? What's like the single size of a vinyl? I've always had that one. That's the one we never had the 12-inch. So I never even had this when I was a kid. It was sealed and it was buried in a box in the back of the store. So just like when you're digging for comic books, just like when you're digging for toys and you go to the, and Amoeba's not an obscure store, but this box was it was like half out the door. Like it's the box no one goes through. Sometimes it pays to dig through the stuff. You never know what you're going to find. I was so happy about this. I didn't even look at the price tag. It wasn't even that much money, but I didn't even look at the price tag. Like I didn't. It was awesome. It was a mint sealed copy of the Super Bowl Shuffle. So that makes me very happy. You guys don't even know. Here's how happy it made me. I almost recorded a G.I. Joe version of the Super Bowl Shuffle for Joe on Joe Theater. That's how much I loved the Bears and the Super Bowl Shuffle and G.I. Joe. I had lyrics working for it. It was a thing. It was like I do Columbo. There was going to be a G.I. Joe Shuffle. Don't get it twisted. It may still happen. But there, just so you know, I'm not playing. There's a file in my desktop called the G.I. Joe Shuffle. And of course, it was going to tie in with William the Refrigerator Perry, member of G.I. Joe. I'm not a dummy. There is a connection there. But yeah, so that was exciting. So maybe I'm living in the past. That's why the word dealio spilled out of my mouth.
You were saying?
I was saying Stalker, and speaking of living in the past, we look at, this is a segment for new listeners, so look at the comic books that were on the shelves the same month that this issue of G.I. Joe was. So this issue of G.I. Joe, it's 153. It's cover dated October of 1994. And that actually puts it at August of 1994 calendar date. So we look at other comics with the October 94 cover date. And then we also take a look at movies that were in the theater during the August of 1994 cover date. It's a little confusing. And I certainly got it twisted and lost track for a good number of episodes here for a while. But it pays off when you think about it, because it puts you back to think about where you were in your life in the month of August of 1994. I was getting ready to go back for sophomore year of college. I don't know where you were, but I was also celebrating with DC Comics 0 Hour. DC's like soft relaunch of their universe again. It wasn't a full crisis level slate wiping, but they used it to clean up a lot of corners of their universe that were messy, so to speak. So they told a lot of origin stories, or retold origin stories. In Superman, they actually did a cool thing with it. They did an origin story, but not necessarily of Superman. We don't need to retell that. They did one for Kenny Braverman, who was not an existing character, but they turned him into, I think his name was Conduit, ended up being his villain name. But they essentially tied him in with Superman's origin, that he was a kid that grew up with Clark Kent, and just life treated him poorly, and then he got the opportunity to become I believe he was kryptonite powered, kind of like Metallo in that regard, but it had some personal ties to Superman. And I always liked Conduit, and that's, if I recall, this was when they took the opportunity. So it was kind of like retelling a bit of Superman's origin, but not really wasting time with, hey guys, remember Krypton and how it exploded? Let's tell that story for the 50th time. Same thing with Batman, if I recall. I don't think they dwelt on, like the death of his parents. I think they did side characters. To be fair, it's been a while since I've read the 0 issues of those. But I think that's kind of where they focused on. However, stuff like Legion of Superheroes, they did retell the origin. I believe they retold the Flash's origin. They certainly did Hawkman, because they were cleaning up Hawkman. Green Lantern, they dealt with Kyle Rayner's origin. Now, he had just joined, so they dipped into like his personal history. So he had just actually been created as a character. So that wasn't too much of a stretch. I believe in Guy Gardner Warrior, they dealt with his origins as a Voldarian, half alien, half human, which is where they were heading towards. So they kind of soft rebooted him there, and he became a he could morph his, I think, what do they call that, a metamorph? I think he could morph his body into weaponry, which looked a little silly, but it worked for the character. It was kind of neat. It was kind of neat. I just wish it had a different character design. I think the design of it was a little too busy and not iconic enough that it was ever, like, there was no chance that it was ever going to stick around, because it just didn't look like conceptually I like it, but it just didn't look like a character design that would work or live forever. But yeah, Hawkman, they used it to relaunch his origin. Let's see here. I don't remember how they dealt with the Justice League one. I don't think they retold the origin, because remember that one, when they did Crisis, they had to retell the origin, and they replaced Wonder Woman with Black Canary, because at that point with George Perez, Wonder Woman, technically Diana wasn't around when the League formed. So maybe they dipped into that, but I feel like they didn't. Legion, they definitely did. They retold the founder's story and over Legion and Legionnaires. It was really well done. So you got Outsider, and these are all 0 issues, by the way. So you've seen a lot of these in the back issue bins a lot. You've seen 0 issues over the years. So if you've ever wondered like what that was, that's this month. Robin, you deal with Tim Drake's origin, Robin 0. The Ray issue 0. The New Titans, Manhunter. Literally, like, all the books had 0 issues. Superman 0, Superboy 0, even though he was just born. Wonder Woman 0. and so on and so forth. So possibly the least essential Zero issue for the entire month was Xenobrood issue 0. And if you've never heard of Xenobrood, you are not alone.
You were saying?
Now we're going to look over at Marvel Comics and see what was on the racks at Marvel Comics. Expand this real quick. Wow, Barbie fashion all the way up to number 46 and Barbie number 46. They were running 2 concurrent Barbie series at the same time, and they both ran 46 issues. They must have been selling a ton. That is wild. Captain America is in his kind of Iron Manish. It's a crossover routine. Just move over, Columbo. It's Iron Captain America and Mannix. It's Iron Mannix. It's kind of the start of his Iron Man outfit because he gets sick and gets too feeble to fight. So he ends up having to build a suit of armor. So this is where they start putting it together. So he's starting to wear this like shoulder pads kind of armor. It eventually becomes like a full-on bodysuit kind of thing. If any of you enjoyed Ms. Marvel, the TV show, which I certainly did, the bad guys, which I thought were underserved. I don't think they were fleshed out very well in the show, but the bad guys, if you recall, they called themselves the Clandestine. They were like a family of superpowered people from, lived in the shadows kind of thing. Well, the Clandestine, they first made their appearance in Marvel Comics Presents, but Clandestine number 1 is on the shelf this month. And this is they're an Alan Davis creation. They never really took off, but I know the first appearance of Clandestine absolutely shot up. I have a feeling this first issue, because issue number 1 is on the stands this month. I have a feeling this first issue probably shot up in price a little bit. I can't imagine it being more than $10 though. But this is a book that, it lived in the dollar bins forever. So depending on what they do with Ms. Marvel and that Clandestine stuff, if they even redress that, because I know her next appearance is going to be in the Captain Marvel movie, and I doubt that's going to have anything to do with the Clandestine. So who knows? They may just drop that and may have just been a one and done thing. But that was exciting. That was an exciting day. A bunch of us with these random dollar books in our collection went, oh, interesting. There's finally some value. I'm finally proven right all these years. The Man Without Fear trade paperback. Remember, not a lot of trades being made back in the day, although it's certainly becoming more and more popular. And this is the Frank Miller. Okay, we got to talk here. Side note, apparently the other day on Twitter, like 2 days ago, so Sunday I think it was, apparently Frank Miller was trending, and it was trending because there was a whole bunch of, I'll say millennials, but I don't know what age people, definitely younger crowds, whole bunch of young dummies, I'm calling you dumb, saying that Frank Miller was a terrible artist, is not a good comic book creator, is varying levels of terrible. I was shocked and I was disgusted by this. I'm not going to sit here and say that the quality of his artwork has been the best in the last 20 years. I know he's been dealing with a lot of health issues, a whole lot of health issues. He almost died from cancer, if I recall correctly. But also, it doesn't matter what he's done now. The work that he put out between the late 70s and what Sin City was 90, 91, 92, that 15-year span of work puts him on the mount, is so good. And so it defined the next 30 years. It put a thumbprint, it put a Frank Miller fingerprint on almost every piece of major comic book work for the next 30 years. So if you're listening to this, and if you heard any part of that conversation on Twitter and you thought to yourself, oh, yeah, that Frank Miller, he's overrated, I'm just here to say you're wrong, and don't let other people hear you say that. You may think it, but one day you're going to look back and you're going to say, boy, I was stupid. Because it's like when I was a kid, I looked back when I was really young, and I've talked about this on the show openly, I did not like Jack Kirby. I couldn't wrap my head around his style. I didn't like it. The stuff I was seeing from him was the not Secret Wars, the Superpowers era, the DC Superpowers stuff, which, was near the end of his life. It wasn't the greatest, admittedly. But now as an adult, I still look at that and go, oh God, there's still more talent there than most, literally most of the people working at the time. But as a kid, I didn't get it, you know, but I knew enough to keep my mouth shut because I saw how other people revered him. And I had the intelligence enough to go, well, maybe it's just not my cup of tea. And then I'll move on and I'll spend my time talking about other things, but I'm not going to stand on a street corner and say, hey, everybody, Jack Kirby's terrible, which is what I was seeing people say about Frank Miller. And then as I grew up, I realized, oh boy, was I wrong. And I know why I was wrong because I was dumb. But also I wasn't understanding the body of his work because I educated myself. And so then now, obviously, Kirby's the king. Like, he's amazing. There's no disparaging at all. The same thing applies to Miller. These young kids, but the problem is they have Twitter. I didn't have Twitter back in the day. Had I Twitter, I probably would have sounded stupid too. But I'm saying it now. If you were on Twitter and you were disparaging Frank Miller, talking about, like, showing pictures of his Dark Knight 3 artwork or even Dark Knight 2 artwork, and you're showing that saying, this guy drew that. No. You're dumb. You're dumb. He could crap on a plate today. And I'm not saying that crap would be good, but I'm saying that doesn't make the work he did, it doesn't detract from the fact that that puts him on every Hall of Fame Mount Rushmore ever. And I'm not saying he's a great dude. I don't think his politics are great. Whatever. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm talking about his work on the page and the way that work shaped this industry. Man, are you showing your butt as a dummy if you're out there saying that Frank Miller's bad. I'm not saying he has to be everyone's personal favorite. He's honestly not one of my personal favorites, but his work is genre defining and I love so much of it. It was wild. I think it was Dan Slott I saw just did this like thematic takedown and just laid out all the reasons why he's, he absolutely, if he had done nothing else, he would be still considered the best. But it's wild to me. So, we all know social media and Twitter is a hellscape, but this is one of those things where we all know a little bit about a little bit, right? So if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you know a little bit about comic books. And again, I'm not saying it has to be your personal flavor. I don't love Monty Python. I don't. It doesn't make me laugh that much. However, I recognize their importance in comedy and I respect it and I get it that people love them and I'm smart enough to see how they influenced all these other people. I watch it. It doesn't tickle me. If that's how you feel about Frank Miller, I don't care. That's great. That's totally fine. You can't deny his influence. You can't deny the importance of Frank Miller. So to all of you moronic Twitters out there who spent their week trolling people for defending Frank Miller, you're dumb. Stop reading comic books. Okay, now back to the show. What else is there to talk about? Well, there's a lot of meh. There's a lot of meh this month. Marvel Comics Presents is nearing the end. I think like 172 is the final issue. This month had 164 and 165. Let's see here. I know it's getting real close near the end. And the reason I bring this up, one, it published twice a month, right? So there's always 2 issues each month. But these later issues, no one was reading this comic book. So they are actually hard to find. So a lot of these later issues of Marvel Comics Presents, which actually have some really cool creators working on them. I'm not saying the stories are great. I have a near complete collection of them. But a lot of these comics are really kind of collectible. Like, strangely enough, I believe 175, the actual final issue, goes for a little bit of cash. I've been trying to get my hands on it, but 175 is the last issue. So we're not really there yet, but we got a few months till we get to the final issue there. But talking about the what were we talking about? The Clandestine showing up in Marvel Comics Presents, so that got me thinking about that. So don't look over Marvel Comics Presents when you're going through those bins and you're seeing later issues of Marvel Comics Presents. They might be worth snagging and throwing in your box because they're quietly, really quietly going up in value. And then there were so many ideas and so many things thrown against the wall in those issues. A lot of times you'll get something like Clandestine show up in the MCU movies and things like that to add some value to your own personal collection. That's the way I roll. Yeah. So we kind of, I went off my Frank Miller tangent. Kind of brings us to the. Yeah, that's enough. We've done enough.
You were saying?
Now we're gonna look at movies that were in theaters August of 1994. So remember last month we had stuff like Forrest Gump and North. In August, we start the month with, this is a personal favorite, Clear and Present Danger. Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan. Willem Dafoe played John Clark. I like Willem Dafoe a lot. I did not think he made a good John Clark. No, he did not do a good John. What's his name? Michael B. Jordan actually played a pretty good John Clark, but a young John Clark. At this era, and for Clear and Present Danger, John was supposed to be older, and he was just supposed to be a man mountain. And there's nothing man mountain about Willem Dafoe, and that's one of those classic casting things of, like, you can't deny the talent, and you get an offer. You have the opportunity to get Willem Dafoe into your story. Of course, you want to bring him on, but man, does he not fit the role. Kind of like Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise playing him, where Jack Reacher's supposed to be this man mountain of a dude. And I like Cruise, and certainly his star power got 2 of those Jack Reacher movies made. But then you watch the TV show and you see the way that the ex-Aquaman, ex-Hawk from Hawk and Dove guy from the Titans played it. I can't remember his name, pardon me. And you see him play it with this massive stillness to it. And you're like, man, yeah, he's killing it way more than Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise, I mean, I get it. I recognize his gravitas. He's a movie star. But the guy on the TV show, Jack Reacher, just absolutely kills that character. It just really, really does it well. So, but I loved Clear and Present Danger. I thought it was solid. That was one of my favorite. That and Cardinal of the Kremlin. I really love those 2 books. The Little Rascals remake on the 5th of August. Penelope Spheris directed it. She had quite the career, This, I don't remember this movie at all. I don't know if it's any good, but she did Wayne's World and the one I'm thinking of Decline of Western Civilization. That's it. That's the one I'm thinking of. She did that documentary, the Decline of Western Civilization. If you've never seen that, it's fabulous. It's absolutely awesome. It's hilarious. It's so worth a watch. Really, really worth a watch. Oh, dog's getting excited. So she did, and so she was on a roll with, like, she did the Wayne's World, so they gave her the TV. I'm not going to sit here and defend Little Rascals. I don't think it was any good. On August the 10th, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was released in America, at least. I have a feeling it was released in either Australia or New Zealand earlier. Man, I watched this for the first time recently, and it is amazing. It is absolutely a lovely, lovely movie. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my wife, Toilet Teal's favorite movies, and she's always raved about it. And it's awesome. It is absolutely great. Terrence Stamp, Hugo Weaving, Guy Pearce are just phenomenal in this movie. It's so good. If you've never seen The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, I really recommend it. It's just fabulous. A week later, In the Army Now with Pauly Shore, not fabulous. Also, The Next Karate Kid, and this is the one with Hilary Swank as the Karate Kid, also not fabulous. August 19th, the movie Blank Man is out. This is the Damon Wayans movie, as superhero Blank Man, and you will never not convince me that the Blank Man is just his version of Handyman, but someone told him they wanted to do a Handyman, which, if you recall from Living Color, was Handicapped Man, superhero. They wanted to do Handyman as a movie, and someone, rightfully at the studio, says, you cannot do a Handyman movie, and that morphed into Blank Man. And I think it shows. August 24th is Fresh with Giancarlo Esposito, Sam Jackson. I feel like I've seen this, but I don't know. Oh, it was produced by Larry Bender. Interesting. From the Pulp Fiction kind of stuff. Yeah, I feel like I've seen Fresh, but I don't remember anything about it. Here's a movie I wish I remembered nothing about. On August 26th, It's Pat, the Julia Sweeney vehicle about someone so gender neutral, no one knows if it's a man or a woman, and no one will ask. However, overshadowed by a for real killer movie, Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone. Man, it has been a long time since I've watched this. I can't recall if it holds up, but I know it's bonkers. I've watched it so many times when I was in college. Like, it was one of those, like, my God, I need to watch it again movies. And then I wonder if it's worn off or if it's just still because it's bonkers. Rodney Dangerfield's wild in it. Iron Man, what's his name? Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. is electric in it. I think I need to revisit this. The soundtrack was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, we do also on the 26th, we do get another entry into the Police Academy one. This was Mission to Moscow. If you're keeping track, Mission to Moscow. We also get, unfortunately, I think this is his last movie. I believe it is. John Candy's last movie, Wagons East. I'm pretty sure that was his last film, which bums me out, man, because he was just the fucking best. Pardon me. Oh my God, I just swore. I didn't mean to. But John Candy was the best. If anyone deserves a swear, it's John Candy. I loved him so much. And I believe Wagons East was his last flick. But finally, Milk Money, the movie where a kid saves up his milk money to hire his dad a woman of the night. So there's a wholesome film for you from Paramount Pictures.
Now, mass is ready.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about G.I. Joe number 153. So if you remember, last issue, 152, was a flashback issue, but it had nothing G.I. Joe about it. There were no G.I. Joe vehicles in it. It was a Joe Colton flashback story. It was about the origins of G.I. Joe, how President Kennedy asked him to, to make this team like 4 days before he died in Texas. And I had put a bunch of speculation forth because it was also a shorter comic. It was only 16 pages. There were like 8 pages of pinups, and the cover date was weird. I reached out to Scott Koblish, who was the inker on it and inker on so many of these great issues. He didn't recall any of that. So he was not able to, I wish I could say that that we cracked a nut there. He didn't recall any of that. In fact, he said his recollection of 152 was just that, that they had been told it was going to be canceled and they got the pages. I think he said they were kind of rushed pages, but they got them just like normal and they had to get them done. And I asked him, like, the cover dated a year prior to publication. Like, did that have any? And he didn't have any recollection on that. So I don't know. I'm no closer to the answer on that. If it was just a normal, if it was just a normal one, why was it only 16 pages? And if it was only 16 pages because maybe they were running late, why, I don't know. Like, why, there was no skyscrapers. There was, I don't know. There's still a lot more questions about that. But if he's listening, I want a huge thank you, shout out to Scott Koblish for at least clarifying that, according to him, everything was normal. Like, normal in the sense of he were canceled, but nothing. It wasn't. He didn't recollect that it was about any kind of to be prepackaged with a toy or any other format. It was just do this issue. Now, having said that, 153 is by a different author, as is 154. So there is some, we'll say, fill-in hijinks. Now, whether these were created as fill-ins to take up time while Larry worked on 155, I don't know. Or were these inventory issues that were sitting in the drawer that needed to be used? I don't know the answer to that. So, and we do have, I mean, it's art. Well, it's like Will Rosado's the artist on it, and Will Rosado had been drawing the book like 2 years prior. So it makes me think that maybe this was an inventory issue that he worked on back in the day. I don't know, but it's written by Eric Fine, F-E-I-N, not Larry. And it's certainly not super tight in. It's a Scarlett adventure. I gotta say, I don't mind it. I was warned by one of you guys, I think it was, I forget who it was. I think it was Mike Irizarry, said like, thumbs down on 153 and 54. It's not terrible. I gotta be honest. It's a rehash of Terminator. That's all it is, but it's not terrible. I've enjoyed it. So here we go. G.I. Joe number 153. It's featuring Scarlett, as the cover says. And she is what looks like at a construction site with a battle android trooper looming over her. It says Shadow of the Bat, the B period A period T period, which is hilarious because that's an inside joke. Because DC had recently launched their book called Shadow of the Bat. So this is a little, not poking fun at it, but it's, it's a little recognition of that. It's a play on the words of what would have been probably, if not the top selling Bat title at the time, certainly one of them. The cover art is by Elman Brown and Carlos Garzón. And it's okay. Like it's fine. It's there's a lot of that image smoke going that covers a lot of details. So you just have the bat's legs just cut off by smoke. So you don't have to actually draw him standing on anything. Her form is covered by a lot of smoke. So it's just really, they drew her head in the bat, and then someone could put in some backgrounds and some colors. I like the color choices. I like the orange of the background. It kind of makes everything else pop. That works. She's reaching for a gun, a rifle in the front of the panel. It works. I like the bat's head over top the G.I. Joe logo. Talking about the bats in this version of the bat, I don't like them. This was an era where because of Terminator 2, I want to say, they were really getting into morphy metal things made of metal that didn't look robotic. They looked more like robotic monsters instead of actual built robots that had to function as a robot. And that's kind of where we're going with this stuff. So this generation of bats, just, they don't. I like my bats to look like bats. I think it's charming that they wear pants. Let's put it that way.
Yo, Joe!
Put some pants on your bat. So Shadow of the Bat is the actual name of the story, which is hilarious. Plot by Eric Fine. Script by Peter Quinones. Will Rosado on art. Jack Snyder on inks. Vicky Williams letters. Shy does the colors. Mike Lackey is the editor. And Tom DeFalco is the editor-in-chief. We open with, and I like the pencils throughout. They're good. I mean, they're pretty hatched. I've always enjoyed Will Rosado's work, so that shines through here. He's got some great panels and pages that work really well. I like his staging. The inks are pretty good. Like there's, they do backgrounds in it. It's overall, it's an enjoyable work. I don't love the design of the bat. Again, I've said that. And early on, this is a new scientist lady for us. This isn't an established character. They don't even introduce her for, I think, 3 pages. They finally mention her name. And I don't need full backgrounds in everybody, but it helps, especially someone who looks just like Black Canary. So this Black Canary looking woman is bending over awkwardly to put finishing touches on this bat. She asks these 2 Vipers what they think of the prototype. And the Televiper gets real cheeky, says, yeah, it looks good from here, because he's staring at her buttocks.
Yo, Joe!
And she replies, and this is where you first get the glimpse at her, where she really does look exactly like Black Canary. She's got blonde hair, parted on the side with the yellow lock curls cutting over her face, exactly like Black Canary of the era. And she's got a cobra choker on, exactly like Black Canary. Her blouse it's cut very much like the Supergirl 1970s design, if you remember that, where it was kind of blousy, and she had the S over her chest, like over the side of her chest, not in the middle of her chest. And that's what's going on here. With this Cobra lady, she's got the Cobra sigil over her, her left breast. And then black kind of flary bottom pants with boots. So she's got a real Black Canary vibe going on. But we learn, they do refer to her as Nox, but we don't know who Nox is. And Nox is really all we ever get out of it. But we get that our target is a Joe named Shana O'Hara, codenamed Scarlett. When she was our prisoner, we recorded her brainwaves. So they're going to use Scarlett's brainwaves to implanted into this bat to then track her. So that's how they're going to go after Scarlett. And when Cobra sees her new weapon system in action, they'll be happy to meet her price to get their hands on the technology. So it's vibes of Terminator sending this robot to track down, Sarah Connor kind of a thing. And the robot looks very Terminator-y. Arnold sans flesh with a little bit of Battlestar Galactica Cylon in it.
Yo, Joe!
Now, we're in Salt Lake City for some reason, and I guess maybe this is the nearest town to Snake Eyes' High Sierra Mountains. And Scarlett's walking the streets in a giant raincoat like a flasher. She happens to also bump into another redhead who's also walking the streets in a giant raincoat, also apparently ready to flash people. And they have a run-in. Scarlett's wearing a dark blue raincoat. This other lady with exact matching red hair is wearing a light gray raincoat. And this other lady is not very nice at all. They bump into each other. She says, "Watch where you're going. You wrinkled my cashmere." And the lady calls Scarlett fatso. Which is awesome. Some random Cobra stooge is spotted Scarlett, and he calls into Nox.
Yo, Joe!
So now they're going to this over muscled bat is going to be deployed and go after Scarlett's brainwaves. And Nox / Black Canary says she's transferred control of the bat to this mobile remote system, so they're ready to take off whenever this Cobra Viper pilot is. And we just get it's a little bit of story heavy lifting where we reiterate that she has to remind the pilot, so the pilot here is in the role of us, because the pilot's nervous flying with this bat, and she says the bat only targets brainwave patterns, so you should be safe because he's a dummy. Get it? Now shut up and get to the site.
Yo, Joe!
Really clean pencils on this issue. Like I do like it. Yeah, like Rosato's renderings of Scarlett and this Nox lady are solid. This definitely looks like a Terminator jumping out of the plane, for sure. And it just does one of those jumps straight out. Doesn't have a parachute or anything. Just jumps straight out of the helicopter with the mission to, quote, kill Scarlett. And she even uses the term, Nox uses the term terminate with extreme prejudice. And we go like story. So on this page, it starts out with kind of small panel, but like a wide view of the helicopter over this part of the city. And then it gets a little closer to her in the cockpit. Now you're in the cockpit with her. You see her turn on the brainwave. And then it gets as close to the target as possible, which is his eyes. So that language is taking you from, it's from what she's activating to the thing she's activating. So that's the storytelling narrative trick there. Like if she had hit time to activate and then it had cut to Scarlett's face, you would think, the visual there would be telling you that she's activating something within Scarlett, but it's not it. It's turning the lights on of the robot. So that's the narrative tell. And if you look closely, the not bubbles, but the panels overlap at that point. So as she hits activate, the panel of the robot's eyes opening is overlapping and crossing over into when she activates it, which is great because in the two previous panels, they're separate and solo. So there's even more visual tricks to link the two moments together. So it's great. It's really, really smart, very deftly written, penciled as well.
Yo, Joe!
So Scarlett's lamenting that Snake Eyes and I just need to get away. Get away! Aren't you living in the high Sierras? But he did just get back from rescuing Storm Shadow, so I guess that's what she's referencing. And again, if this was written as a fill-in, they wouldn't have had that reference of what he was doing in the previous issue. But they kind of were getting away anyway. But she hears this whistling from above, and that's literally the robot falling on her. Sees the shadow and jumps out of the way right at that moment. Now the robot, it's funny, the robot lands on a car. And certainly she's got to jump out of the way. But that means the robot was not going to land on her anyway. So I feel like as a robot, you should have better aim than that. But the robot lands on this car. Nice explosion. Good use of colors on this page to, just give us this 3D pop effect of her coming right out of the page.
Yo, Joe!
And it just keeps saying, kill Scarlett. That's funny. Her reply is, you're the second person that's been rude to me this morning, And so that's when she pulls out, this whole time she's been carrying an Uzi, which makes me think that's why that other lady called her Fatso, because Scarlett's like bulked up underneath that, the trench coat. She's carrying a machine gun. Which she unloads on their bat and to little avail. And that's when she also realized that he looks familiar, that it's one of the revamped Battle Android Troopers, last seen in G.I. Joe 133.
Yo, Joe!
So this is that moment. This is the moment in all the Terminator movies, all the robot movies, all the killer, most killer, any kind of killer movie where it's a whole bunch of people shoot at them, the smoke clears, and then you still see the guy standing there seemingly untouched, and that's what you get here. So now the robots, after she shoots at him, and there's a bit of an explosion and all this stuff, he's still just standing there smoking in the wreckage, and he's completely fine. We also now see through his eyes the tracking of Scarlett's brainwave scanner, or not brainwave scanner, but her brain waves through the scanner. And according to Dr. Knox, he's performing beautifully. Maybe I'll add another zero to my asking price. Oh, Knox, you greedy, greedy lady.
Yo, Joe!
So Scarlett's running, and this is there's just a lot of T2 and T1 really rolled into it. So now she runs down an alley. She gets a call. She does get a call, and this is important. She gets a call out to the pit. In Utah. So I guess if they're in Salt Lake City, maybe she's actually not from this year. She's probably on leave from the pit in Utah. That's probably where she's coming from. But she gets a call out, but then the robot knocks the radio from her hands. And before she can get a shot off at close range, he destroys her Uzi. And this close-up of her face here is very Rosado that I appreciated when he worked on Green Arrow. He did a lot of these kind of close-ups, like this angle up on the face. So I like that. I appreciate that look. I think the way he rendered it in the Green Arrow stuff, I think was better. This is a little unformed, but it's there. Like I see that pose, and I know I've seen that pose from him before, and it looks really good when he does it.
Yo, Joe!
So now, according to Dr. Knox, she's going to, quote, give the final kill command. The robot hoists, I almost said Leia for some reason, Scarlett above his head, and it throws her into a garbage bin. It's screaming, kill Scarlett, but then shoots the garbage bin and incinerates the garbage and misses her entirely. And she says, I love the smell of incinerated garbage in the morning. Like it's funny. There's definitely different. It's a different style of writing than Larry, and you could tell just in the script. And so the script was Peter Quinones. So Eric Fine did the plot, which is just Terminator, and then Peter Quinones is doing the script here, and it's just different, like there's no detailed explanation, details on the machinery that's happening here. This is traditional, like, sneering bad guys conversation, which Larry does, but he does more overblown. This is more action movie, with lines like, I love the smell of incinerated garbage and things like that. And there's less focus on the details of like Scarlett would have been talking about the make and model of her Uzi and how it can burst through what type of steel. And this thing must be made of steel that's harder than that because it's not having an effect, things like that.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, half a block away, we have a bunch of guys on a construction site. If you've heard me talk before about when you see like detailed faces in a comic book, that's usually someone who's friends of the penciler. And there are 3 faces here that I would bet dollars to donuts are either the actual other creators on the books or the editors at Marvel, or somehow these 3 construction workers are in Will Rosado's life at that point in time. They look really good, but they're also, there's just such a distinctive look to each of them. He was drawing these from life, from knowledge, so that's pretty fun. And this is our first tip as to that crazy lady from the beginning was not just a random lady, that she's going to come back because one of the guys says, hey, boss, that looks like your wife, Brenda. And he's like, yeah, she does. So apparently his wife, Brenda's a jerk. And this robot is chasing Scarlett through this construction site.
Yo, Joe!
She heads to an elevator. The ignition key's there, but of course that's not turning. So you get that classic tension of, the car is not turning on. The elevator door won't close. The machine won't start. You have the answer in front of you, but something's not cooperating. So it has to get closer and closer. And that's what's happening here. So the robot's getting closer and closer. But Scarlett gives it a good old kick in the pants and she gets the elevator working. So just in time for the robot to catch up and get one arm on the elevator.
Yo, Joe!
So now it is hanging on by one arm. His gun arm is swinging up to point at Scarlett. And she is able to get out of the way because he's, certainly not in a great place to aim. And she gets off on the 10th floor, and that's when she jumps off. But the elevator continues up, and so the robot pulls up. So now he's actually level with her, but he's still hanging on by his one arm. And she takes this pickaxe that she had, and she drives that right through the chest of the robot, and makes some headway with it. She buries it in his chest, and it sends, it's good and explosive.
Yo, Joe!
And then she takes a sledgehammer and busts his hand that was doing the holding on. So now he falls 10 stories, which is a good fall. I hope I hammered home my point. And the robot calculates that impact will happen in 2.002 seconds, shielding the primary motor functions, but she happens to drop him directly into an open cement mixer. And that cement causes Dr. Knox to lose the monitoring signal. So they've lost connection with the Battle Android Trooper. And she can't afford to lose all that bad hardware at this site. So the helicopter has to get closer to hopefully get past all of that cement. And that's when Scarlett sees the Cobra jetcopter. And it brings me back to they really needed to come up with a name for this Cobra helicopter. I know it was never a toy, but it was in the comic book so much. We needed a name for it. I don't know what they should have called it. The Cobra Transport. I don't even know. For some reason, I was thinking Barracuda, but I feel like there is a Cobra Barracuda. I don't even know what you call it, like the Flying Whale or something, or the Flying Shy, something. It needed a name, and it's to its discredit that we went 155 issues and they never named that thing.
Yo, Joe!
It's got the shark markings on it, so it should have been like Sky Shark or something like that. That's what it should have been. Or the Sky Whale, or the Sky Dolphin, or the Sky, I don't know what, but it has that big mouth on it, right? Anyway, so Scarlett picks up a rivet gun that's nearby, and just starts firing hot rivets at the helicopter, and it's cool because it's the way they draw it is really nice. Actually, it pierces the cockpit, but then it just plunks down. So it's got enough force to, so it's not they're not treating them like they're high velocity rounds. They're just hot pieces of lead that are causing damage, but then they lose all their velocity and force. So they're just kind of, it will eventually take the helicopter down, but then they have an actual machine gun with turrets, a turreted machine gun, so they can actually do a lot more damage to Scarlett. So they get that going, and she has to make her escape.
Yo, Joe!
Clean facial work by Rosado and all this stuff. Really, really clean. So if you're wondering, like, well, what happened to the bat? This whole time, the bat's been in the cement mixer, and this is where Scarlett now, 10 stories later, she hits the ground, and that's when the bat pops out of the cement mixer. So this is the moment in T2 when he gets frozen, and he gets frozen by the what do you call it? The liquid that freezes the metal guy, and then he breaks apart, and you think you're okay, but then the heat of the metal slowly thaws out the frozen metal, and so then he kind of forms back up. That's kind of what's happening here. So it's, you thought you beat him because you dropped him in something, and then he comes back, and that's what you're dealing with here. So now he's got all this cement on him, so he's going to be a little more damaged, and he actually throws that pickaxe that she used on him, and he damages her leg. So now she can't run away. So now we're talking with like a tighter battlefield now.
Yo, Joe!
Scarlett says, "Let's call me the Spin Doctor." Man, were they a terrible band. I'm going to burn this out of my memory that this never happened. But she didn't say Spin Doctors. And a spin doctor is someone who lies in the press to take a bad story and spin it. So there's that reference, but man, oof. But she spins she turns the cement mixer on. So basically the cement mixer starts spinning, and so the robot is, losing all ability to function. But it fires off a hand, very Machine Man style. Or Inspector Gadget style. So it fires its fist, but it's attached to a cable, and that pulls it out of the concrete. And then she's able to actually hack away at some wiring, which loosened a whole bunch of girders, and the girders fall and collapse on this robot.
Yo, Joe!
So Sarah Connor really did a good number facing this Battle Android Trooper. Dr. Burks? Dr. Bex? What's her name? Dr. Knox. She's lost complete connection to the robot. Damage report. The robot, of course, gets up. This is linked to main control unit inoperative. Brainwave signature tracking inoperative. It's going to rely on visual description tracking. And, that's when it looks around. And, of course, at that moment, Brenda shows up. And what's funny? They don't really ever show Brenda's face. They really don't. And if you look at, they don't, the next few pages with Brenda in it, Brenda's face is always in shadow or not shown. And I don't know why that is. And maybe it's because that if the robot saw her face, it would know enough to know it's not Scarlett. It just sees the red hair in the coat. But as of now, the robot thinks that's Scarlett.
Yo, Joe!
Yeah, it's really weird. It feels like it's supposed to be a reveal, but then there's no ever reveal on her face. It's not like she looks, wildly different. It's a strange. I wonder if that was in the script, and then they didn't do anything with it at the end of the day. But it's gonna murder Brenda, and there's a nearby garbage truck, like a regular old garbage scow kind of truck. And she slams that thing in reverse, completely running over the bat, releasing Brenda. But I gotta say, that's a risky move.
Yo, Joe!
Because I don't know how you avoid running over Brenda in this instance and crippling Brenda for life. But he is in the garbage scow. And so Scarlett is able to pull the lever, and the hydraulics compress him and goes, snap, crackle, pop. Which is actually funny. That's pretty much, they use crunch, they use snap and crackle, and they actually don't use pop, but to show that he's being destroyed. And the feedback shorts out Nox's control panel. That can only mean her beautiful bat has been destroyed. She says, land this copter. I'm going to kill her with my bare hands. And right then, a squadron of G.I. Joe razor blade helicopters show up. And this is from the call to the pit. And they're finally showing up, the cavalry. Now this razor blade, let's see here. This was, let me see, how close does this look? Yeah, it looks pretty close to the toy. I gotta say, it looks pretty close to the toy. It's yeah, it's not. It's the search and rescue action launcher. Although I feel like if that's what they're using for attacking people, well, maybe it's the only. Maybe it's the only vehicle they had on hand. But you need to squeeze a toy in there. It looks pretty good.
Yo, Joe!
And now, again, in very Terminator moment, the only thing that survives is the head with the glowing eye from the trash compactor. And so Scarlett picks it up, and she asks Brenda, how the Cashmere is, and Brenda's terrible. You menace, get away from me. Your garbage truck stunt almost killed me. I should see you. I gotta agree with you, Brenda. That was a stunt. Scarlett refers to her as an ungrateful wench. And I feel like that's an edited word. But she said the head still looks intact, and the tech boys are going to have a good time taking it apart. I feel like she forgot the last time they took a robot into the pit. Way back in, what was it, like number 8 or number 7, when the robot reassembled itself and tried to crawl off the pit, and it was a hunt to get to it before it could send out the radio. I feel like Scarlett is either never seen a Terminator movie, never read one of those early Ultron stories, and forgot her own adventure with that robot in the pit. But she is bringing the Terminator head back, and so she's going to head home, and that's it. Calls for a taxi. Next issue, Roadblock flies the unfriendly skies. Now we get there's a pin up here, and it's Dusty. It's a good-looking Dusty, although he looks like it looks like half of his hair has been burned away by like a errant firework. But it's a good-looking Dusty. I don't know who he's with, but the other guy is also dressed exactly like Dusty. But there you go. And we got a message from Mike here. It says, Yo, Joes. This is Postbox from the Pit. Hope you liked our special guest issue, Shadow the Bat. Super special thanks go to everyone who pitched in. Web of Spider-Man editor Eric Fine, who plotted this tale of our robotic ruckus a full year ago. So yes, this had to be a fill-in issue. Yeah, there you go. If you like Peter Quinones scripting, then check out our next issue, which pits Roadblock up against a jumbo jet full of Cobra dudes. So this is Passenger 57 next issue. This was Terminator today. Lethal Lair returns in issue 155, a story so dramatic, so cool, that we may never top it. That's funny, because he knows it's the final issue of G.I. Joe. So he's right. They will never top that issue. We got letters here from Ben Patrick out of Harpers Ferry, Iowa. Eric Braham out of Kingwood, West Virginia. Zach, it's almost Zach Brannigan. Zach Baranjan out of Glen Head, New York. Adrian Todorovic out of Castellar, British Columbia, Canada. James McFadden out of Auburn, Massachusetts. And next issue, when Roadblock flies cross country for some R&R, little does he realize everyone else aboard this Jumbo 747 is actually a Cobra agent. What? So I'm looking forward to it. I enjoyed this issue. I thought this was pretty good. It's certainly a fill-in. It certainly doesn't advance the bigger story. But I think it was well done. I think the art was great. And yeah, it's a rehash of Terminator. I can use those every once in a while. So with that, I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas. I appreciate all of you. I hope Santa brings you everything you ever wanted. Christmas was always a special time for G.I. Joe fans. So many photos of us as kids with just all the G.I. Joe toys in front of us. So think on that. Be kind, be gentle, and remember, Frank Miller is in the Hall of Fame. And if you think otherwise, rethink your life. Now you're Joe. Joeing is half the battle.